A black teen lay dying on the pavement, and the officer who shot him said, "I feared for my life. No weapon, no warning, just silence from the system." But what they didn't expect was a prosecutor who looked like Jamal, and she wasn't afraid to burn bridges to speak the truth. This is her story. The snow hadn't melted yet. It was the kind of cold that held things still: blood, breath, truth. A single red hoodie stood out against the white, soaked through and unmoving. His name was Jamal Keane, 15 years old, honor roll student, on his way home from an after-school art class, and now lying in a park with a bullet in his back, alone. The call came in just after 6:40 p.m. Officer Dwayne Keller, white, mid-30s, said he spotted suspicious movement in the bushes, claimed the teen reached for something. No weapon was found. No bodycam footage was recovered. No witness ever came forward. The official report read like so many before it: quick, clinical, evasive. The department's spokesperson called it a tragic situation currently under review. Local news ran a headline that evening: teen fatally shot by officer during routine patrol investigation underway. Then silence. But one person saw more than just a headline. Assistant District Attorney Maya Owens had handled enough cases to know how these things played out. A closed-door review. A cleared officer. A quiet funeral. Then everyone moved on. But something about Jamal's name stayed with her. Maybe it was the fact he was the same age as her son. Maybe it was the way the report used the word threat so casually. Or maybe it was Officer Keller himself, already flagged in 2 prior use-of-force complaints, both involving black teens, both quietly dismissed. Maya requested the full file, and when it arrived, she knew exactly what they wanted her to do. Close it, stamp it, move on, keep the system smooth and unbothered. But she couldn't. Not this time. Not with a mother who refused to cry because crying wouldn't bring her boy back. Not with a photo of Jamal's sketch pad left half-drawn in his backpack. Not when the truth had already been buried under snow and protocol. She called her supervisor to say she'd be taking the case. There was a long silence on the other end. Then came the warning. Don't make this personal. Maya, you know how fragile these things get when race is involved. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The next day, Keller was notified that the shooting was being re-examined as a potential criminal offense. His union immediately pushed back. The department's leadership closed ranks, and whispers started spreading through the courthouse. She's making it about race. She'll ruin her career over this. But Maya Owens didn't flinch, because this time, someone had to stop the silence. This time, the system wouldn't get to walk away untouched. A racist cop had killed a black teen and she refused to let it slide. The first thing Maya did was pull Jamal Keane's school records. No history of violence, no suspensions. A straight-A student with a passion for drawing. Teachers described him as quiet, observant, kind. His art teacher said he stayed late most days, working on a portfolio. That night, he'd taken the usual shortcut through Franklin Park, just a few blocks from his home. The shooting happened at 6:41 p.m. His mother had dinner ready at 6:45. He never made it. Next, she visited the scene herself. Snow still lined the path, dirty and crusted over, but the layout was clear. The bushes Keller claimed Jamal had leapt from were barely knee-high. The view from the squad car's supposed position showed no obstruction. Maya took photos, measured distances, asked questions. Most of the neighbors hadn't even heard the gunshot. One older woman said she saw a white officer pacing back and forth with his hands on his head before backup arrived. But she wasn't interviewed by Internal Affairs. She wasn't even contacted. Maya requested the full 911 audio logs. There was no call before the shooting, just Keller's voice crackling after the fact. Shots fired. Suspect down. No movement. His tone was flat, rehearsed, like checking boxes. He never mentioned Jamal's name, never asked for medical backup until 2 full minutes later. At the morgue, Maya met the medical examiner, a woman she'd worked with for years. Off the record, the examiner admitted that the department had pressured her to classify the cause of death as inconclusive threat response, a term that would imply Keller was reacting to a potential danger, even if no weapon existed. She hadn't complied. The official report was neutral, but neutral, in this case, was already a compromise. The deeper Maya dug, the more resistance she faced. Her inbox flooded with anonymous concerns. Fellow prosecutors warned her to be careful and think long-term. One even slipped a note on her desk. It's not your fight. But that was the problem, wasn't it? It was always someone else's fight until no one fought at all. She began reviewing Keller's personnel file. It was sanitized, redacted, polished. But buried deep were 2 complaints, both involving excessive force against young black men. Both dismissed. One had been resolved internally. The other was unsupported by evidence. No charges, no suspension, not even a warning. In both cases, the language was eerily similar. The suspect acted in a threatening manner. Maya underlined that phrase. 3 different incidents, 3 different suspects, same justification. She requested bodycam footage from that night. The response came back. Officer Keller had technical difficulties, and his device failed to activate. Convenient, yet his dashboard cam was working. Maya demanded access to the footage. What she saw chilled her. Keller stepping out of his car, gun already unholstered, breathing heavy, not panicked, but wired, focused. He wasn't reacting to a threat. He was anticipating one. And Jamal, he never saw it coming. Maya's son, Isaiah, noticed her stress before she even said a word. She'd been quieter at home, eating less, scrolling her phone at odd hours. One night, he walked into the kitchen and found her staring blankly at Jamal's sketchbook, which she kept on the counter. "You gonna get him justice?" he asked. Maya blinked, like she hadn't realized he was there. "I'm gonna try," she whispered. He nodded once, then turned off the light behind her as he left. At work, the air around Maya shifted. People no longer made eye contact in the elevator. One assistant DA asked if she'd like to recuse herself for optics. She responded calmly, "I'm not stepping aside because the optics make you uncomfortable." Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. The message landed. Meanwhile, Keller's legal team had begun their media spin. Articles surfaced questioning Jamal's whereabouts that evening. One headline read, "Was teen in park involved in local vandalism ring?" It was based on a single, anonymous source and quickly retracted. But the damage was done. The internet did what it always did, twisted facts, flooded the comment sections with racist dog whistles, and cast doubt on a dead boy who couldn't defend himself. Maya wasn't surprised. She'd seen it before, but it hit different this time. Maybe because she'd seen Jamal's mother sit perfectly still for hours during their meetings, hands folded in her lap, face unreadable. The only time she'd broken down was when Maya showed her the dashcam clip. She didn't cry. She just whispered. He didn't run. He didn't even run. And Maya knew then she wasn't just building a case. She was building a wall against forgetting. She started digging into Officer Keller's past in earnest. Old academy classmates, off-the-record conversations. One former colleague told her over coffee, Keller always said he'd rather shoot than hesitate. He said, hesitation gets you killed. Maya asked if anyone had ever reported that. The man just laughed bitterly. You think anyone wants to be the reason a cop loses his badge? Her next move was risky. She met with an internal affairs officer. She trusted a black woman named Reese, who'd quietly risen through the ranks. Reese admitted that Keller's file had been flagged internally twice for pattern behavior, but the department buried it to avoid lawsuits. They don't fix the system, Reese said. They fix the paperwork. That line stuck with Maya for days. They fix the paperwork. The final straw came when a city council member called Maya, personally not to offer support, but to warn her. You're inflaming racial tension, he said. You're not just challenging a cop, you're questioning the entire department. She didn't argue. She just ended the call. And that night, she pulled up Jamal's last sketch, a half-finished portrait of a face with no mouth. He never got to finish it, but maybe she still could. The pushback became tactical. First came the leaked memo, an unsigned document hinting that Maya was compromising departmental integrity for personal bias. It wasn't official, but it made its way into the inboxes of nearly every prosecutor and detective in her building. Then came the interviews former officers going on local talk radio saying things like, I feel for that kid's family, but we don't need people turning every split-second decision into a civil rights case. The message was clear. Maya was becoming a problem, not just to the department, to the narrative, to the illusion that the system could police itself. But she kept going. She filed for a full inquest into the shooting, forcing internal records to become court-accessible. She brought in an independent forensics team to recreate the shooting trajectory using the dashcam angle and environmental data. The conclusion Keller would have had to be standing 3 feet to the left of where he claimed, and Jamal would have been turning away, not charging forward. A quiet technician who'd worked on city traffic systems reached out anonymously. Said one of the cameras near the park had been tampered with shortly after the incident. Maya followed the lead, obtained a digital trace log, and discovered something chilling. The footage deletion had been requested from an IP address inside the precinct. Just hours after the shooting. That wasn't protocol. That was cover-up. She brought this to her boss, the district attorney himself, a white man with a practiced calm and an Ivy League tie. He looked her dead in the eye and said, If you continue down this path, Maya, you might win the case, but you'll lose everything else. You understand that? Right, she did. But she also understood something he never would. Jamal had lost everything already, at home. Isaiah was watching the story unfold on social media. His friends were reposting clips, arguing in the comments. Why does she care so much? One caption read, It's just another case. Isaiah asked her that night. Why do you keep going? Maya looked at him for a long time. Then she said, Because I want someone like you to live in a world where people don't look at you and assume threat. I want to be the reason someone like you is believed. The case gained quiet traction. Civil rights groups took notice. A non-profit offered to help cover expert witnesses. A retired Judge Black, once exiled for being too political, offered background support. But none of it guaranteed a conviction. It was still just Maya, walking into a courthouse where everyone else was hoping she'd walk out empty-handed. But what they didn't know, what they never counted on, was that Maya had already made peace with losing. What she wouldn't make peace with was silence, and if her voice was the only one left in that courtroom that said, This was wrong, then so be it. Because in a city used to forgetting, She chose to remember, and the memory of Jamal Keane demanded nothing less. The first real crack came during the pretrial hearing. Maya had subpoenaed the precinct's internal chat logs, not expecting much, just a formality. But when the logs arrived, one thread stood out. Dated the night of the shooting, it showed Keller messaging another officer. "That kid was creeping. Told you someone would jump me out here. Had to shut it down fast." The phrase "shut it down" wasn't protocol. It was instinct. And it wasn't defensive. It was aggressive. Calculated. She presented the message in court. Keller's defense objected immediately, called it informal banter. But the judge allowed it. The room tensed. The first seed of doubt was planted, not just in the jury pool, but in the eyes of the public. News outlets that had ignored the case suddenly started showing up. Asking questions Maya had been shouting into the dark for weeks. Why was Jamal Keane labeled a threat? Why did Keller draw his weapon before making contact? Why did the department bury this? But with attention came retaliation. 2 nights later, Maya found her car windows smashed outside her apartment. Nothing stolen, just broken glass and silence. She didn't file a report. She knew it wouldn't go anywhere. But she did call her son, told him to stay at his father's for the week. She couldn't afford distraction, couldn't afford fear, because the trial date was set. And Keller's union was pouring money into his defense. They brought in a high-profile attorney who specialized in officer-involved shootings. His strategy: blame the victim. Jamal had been in that park before, he told the press. There were known thefts. He was out after dark, alone. Subtext, he was asking for it. Again. But Maya wasn't done. She had one more angle, and it came from a place no one expected. A rookie cop. He called anonymously. Said he'd seen something Keller did weeks before the shooting, another stop involving a young black boy. Barely 13. No report was filed. No body cam activated. But the kid had run. Terrified. Screaming about being next. Maya tracked him down. His name was Marcus. He was 16 now. Still scared. Still remembering. And he agreed to testify. That was the first break the defense couldn't explain away. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. It was deliberate. And the public, they started to notice. Started to care. Not all of them, but enough. Maya stood outside the courthouse that evening. No cameras. Just my black mother who whispered, "You're doing what they never do. You're staying." Maya nodded, her voice low. So did Jamal. When the trial began, the courtroom wasn't neutral. It was already leaning. Keller entered clean-shaven, suited, flanked by uniformed supporters who filled the first 2 rows. Maya noticed they all wore thin blue line pins. Silent protest. Silent warning. She began with the basics, the forensic evidence, the trajectory, the absence of a weapon, the deleted traffic footage. But jurors were stiff, reserved. Some leaned back when she spoke. Others avoided her eyes. They weren't hostile. They were hesitant. That was worse. They didn't know if they were allowed to believe her yet. Then came Marcus. He took the stand wearing a gray hoodie too big for him, hands trembling. But his voice held. He spoke of the night Keller stopped him. No warning, no explanation, just a spotlight in the face, a command to get down, and the sound of a gun being cocked. Marcus said he wet himself, said he thought he was going to die. Keller let him go without arrest, told him to think twice about creeping in the dark. The courtroom held its breath. Keller's attorney tried to rattle him, asked if he had any video, any proof. Marcus said no, just fear, the same kind Jamal probably felt. The same kind every black kid in that neighborhood knew by heart. And then, something rare happened. The jury leaned forward. For the first time, Maya saw it not just sympathy, but recognition. A shift. But outside, the city roiled. A protest formed outside the courthouse. Small at first, then larger. Some signs read "Justice for Jamal." Others read "Stand with Keller." The tension that had simmered quietly now spilled into the streets. The department released a statement urging civility. The mayor posted something vague about due process. But no one was neutral anymore. Lines were being drawn. That night, Maya came home to find her name plastered across a conspiracy blog. Photos of her son, her college years. One post even hinted she was a radical plant trying to dismantle law enforcement from within. She'd faced racism before, but this was coordinated. Her phone buzzed with blocked numbers. Her inbox overflowed with threats disguised as warnings. "You're ruining your career. Better hope you don't end up in the dark one night." She didn't reply, didn't flinch, but she did double lock the door, because this wasn't about her safety anymore. It was about who would be allowed to tell the story. The system wanted Keller to be a lone mistake, not a symptom. They wanted Maya to walk away quietly, gracefully, forgotten. But she wasn't going anywhere, because Marcus had spoken, and now the silence was cracking. Midway through the trial, Maya dropped the hammer. She introduced a supplemental motion to present evidence that Keller's dashboard cam footage had been altered after the incident. The motion included a sworn affidavit from a forensic video analyst, third party, out of state, with no political ties, who concluded that the timestamp on the footage was edited, not by accident, not by glitch, but by deliberate post-processing. The courtroom went silent. The judge leaned forward. The defense froze. Keller looked down at the table. Maya laid out the timeline. The original video showed Keller getting out of the car, with his hand already on his weapon. The version submitted to Internal Affairs had a 5-second delay, replacing the part where he muttered, "Let's get this over with." Those 5 seconds told everything, and someone had erased them. The defense objected, claimed the footage was corrupted during extraction. The analyst pushed back. No, this was manual. This was human error or human intent. The judge allowed the evidence. It was a seismic shift that night. Maya got called into the district attorney's office. The tone was civil. The message wasn't, "You're making this office look divided." He told her, "I brought you in to inspire trust in the system, not burn it down." Maya stared at him. "The system's already burning," she replied. "I'm just pointing at the smoke." He offered her a deal. Quietly dropped the charge from manslaughter to negligent discharge of a firearm. A slap on the wrist. "No jail time. We all get to walk away clean," he said. "You included." She refused. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just nodded, disappointed. "You're on your own now, Maya." And he meant it. From that point forward, support vanished. The resources she'd relied on, the research team, the investigators, the internal clerks, all stopped returning her calls. She began prepping for closing arguments alone, her case files stacked in cardboard boxes across her living room floor. Even Reese from Internal Affairs ghosted her. The silence wasn't just bureaucratic, it was tactical. They wanted to isolate her, make her second guess, make her quit. But she didn't. Instead, she called Jamal's mother, told her the deal they'd offered. "You'd understand if I took it," Maya said. "But I can't." There was a long pause on the other end. Then came the reply, quiet but firm. "You're the first person who's ever told me the truth straight. Don't stop now." And so Maya didn't The next morning, she walked into court with no allies beside her, just a briefcase, a closing folder, and the image of a teenage boy, still in a red hoodie, still lying in the cold. This wasn't just her case anymore. It was her line in the sand. The day of closing arguments arrived with a kind of stillness that felt staged. No protests, no cameras, just gray skies and a packed courtroom where every face held the same question. Would she dare? Maya stood slowly, approached the jury, and began not with a quote, not with legal jargon, but with a sketch. Jamal's final drawing. She held it up. A pencil portrait of a boy, half his face shaded, half erased, unfinished. No mouth. This, she said, is what's left. When we let fear speak louder than truth. She paused. Officer Keller says he was afraid, that he acted on instinct, that he followed training. But the law doesn't ask us to accept instinct. It demands we prove intent. And intent is what brought Keller's gun out of his holster before he even saw a face. She moved closer to the jury box. You've heard the timeline. You've seen the doctored footage. You've listened to Marcus, a child, describe the same pattern Jamal faced. You've watched the department try to spin this case into chaos. Why? Because chaos benefits the powerful. If everything is confusing, then no one is responsible. She placed the sketch on the rail before them. But here's what's not confusing Jamal. Keene did not have a weapon. Jamal Keene did not run. Jamal Keene was shot in the back by a man who had already made up his mind about what kind of threat a black boy in a red hoodie must be. Her voice didn't shake. And when we allow that logic to stand, we are not just failing Jamal. We are telling every other child like him that their life is only worth the hesitation of a white man's fear. She ended quietly. Don't let that be the law today. Then she sat. The courtroom didn't applaud. It didn't gasp. It just breathed. The defense followed with predictability. Fear. Confusion. The pressures of police work. Split-second decisions, the attorney said, should not be judged in hindsight. But the words landed hollow now. Too rehearsed. Too worn. The jury was sent to deliberate. Hours passed. Then a full day. Tensions rose online. Will she lose? Will the system win again? Maya didn't check her phone. She sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, her coat in her lap, staring at the floor tiles like they held answers. When the jury returned, their faces were unreadable. The judge asked for the verdict. A long pause. Then, the jury, find the defendant guilty of manslaughter in the first degree. Maya didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She closed her eyes just for a second, not in celebration, but in relief, because for once, a racist cop had killed a black teen, and someone had refused to let it slide. And this time, silence did not win. The headlines came quickly. Officer convicted in controversial shooting. Manslaughter verdict. Divides the city. Historic win for civil rights, or dangerous precedent. They named Maya, but never quoted her. The photos showed her walking out of the courtroom alone, head held high, but no one showed the part where she went straight to the restroom, locked the stall, and sat silently for 10 full minutes, just breathing. The system didn't celebrate her. It recoiled. Within days, the DA's office reassigned her caseload. Then came the internal memo due to unforeseen media pressure and reputational strain. Maya was being placed on administrative leave. No suspension, just a pause. A long, indefinite pause. Officially, it wasn't punishment, but it felt like exile. The press reached out for interviews. She declined every one. She didn't want to become a symbol. Symbols get forgotten the moment the news cycle shifts. She hadn't done this to become anyone's headline. But something unexpected happened. Black law students began showing up outside the courthouse holding signs. She didn't fold. Prosecute with principle. Civil rights lawyers began referencing the case as a new model for community-driven prosecution. One evening, Maya received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a note. "My son is alive because you said the thing we all know they don't see us as children." Maya kept that one. But the real twist didn't come in the courtroom. It came from the footage. The independent forensics analyst who helped Maya later released a public white paper. In it, they included metadata revealing that 2 different officers, not just Keller, had accessed the dashcam database the night the tape was altered. Both officers had since been promoted. Both had publicly defended Keller during the trial. Now, their names were in headlines. 2. It blew open a larger investigation. Internal Affairs had no choice but to act. The department launched a review into evidence tampering, cover-ups, and the unwritten culture of post-shooting damage control. They called it a procedural audit. But Maya knew better. It was a confession without accountability. Still, it was movement. More officers came forward anonymously describing years of silence, pressure to erase inconvenient truths, the quiet threat of losing backup if they crossed the blue line. One officer described it like a second job. There's policing, and then there's keeping the story clean. The media caught wind. Suddenly, the Keller case wasn't just a case. It was a door. And Maya, she had become the key they couldn't take back. In the weeks that followed, Maya felt the weight of her choices in the quietest ways. The phone didn't ring. Invitations disappeared. Her name, once greeted with polite smiles at legal dinners and bar association events, now drew silence. Her mailbox overflowed with junk, some of it from strangers thanking her, some of it from officers telling her to watch her back. But the hardest part was the absence. Not of friends, of normalcy. At home, Isaiah had stopped asking questions. He just watched her, carefully, like a boy trying to gauge whether the ground under his feet was still safe. One evening over dinner, he finally broke the silence. "You gonna keep being a lawyer?" Maya took a moment. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Depends on what kind of lawyer I'd be allowed to be." He nodded, chewing slowly. "You were right, though, about them, about how they see us." She met his eyes, and in that moment, she knew, even if everything else had collapsed, even if her name was blacklisted from every courtroom in the state, she had done something irreversible in her own home. She'd shown her son that truth mattered more than survival. Then came the offer. A national reform organization reached out, a sleek, well-funded nonprofit focused on justice system innovation. They wanted Maya to come on board as a spokesperson, a director of narrative impact. The job came with money, exposure, platforms, TED Talks, panels. They sent over a draft press release from prosecutor to reformer Maya Owens. Joins the fight for change. It sounded like a victory, but Maya read between the lines. They didn't want her story. They wanted her symbol. They wanted to parade her conviction as proof that the system worked, to sell the illusion that justice had prevailed. But Maya had lived the truth. Keller's conviction wasn't a sign the system was working. It was a glitch, a break in the usual routine of cover-up and silence, a moment, not a movement. She turned them down, politely, firmly, quietly, because she wasn't interested in being packaged. She wasn't a brand. She was a woman who'd stared down the machinery of denial and said, "No more." And even now, even with her future uncertain, she knew that was enough. Because the system hadn't destroyed her, it had exposed itself. In the months that followed, Maya didn't go back to the courtroom. She didn't return to her old office. She didn't write a book. take interview, or start a podcast. Instead, she returned to something she hadn't touched in years: teaching. She took a position at a local community college, quiet, underfunded, and filled with students who didn't grow up thinking the law was built for them. Her first lecture wasn't about precedent or procedures. It was about memory, about what we choose to carry when the courtroom lights go out. Justice, she told them, isn't something you win. It's something you hold, even when no one else will. Some students knew who she was. Others didn't. It didn't matter. She wasn't there to be a legend. She was there to plant something that could outlive the verdict. Meanwhile, the city changed in small, jagged ways. The police department launched a review board for use of force cases. For the first time, 2 civilians with voting power were added. The DA's office saw quiet resignations. A new candidate, young, Latino, grassroots-funded, announced his run, citing Maya's case as the reason he entered the race. And Jamal Keane's name was added to a mural near the basketball courts where he used to play. None of it fixed what had been broken, but it shifted the ground. One day, Maya ran into Marcus outside a grocery store. He was taller now, more confident, still wore his hoodie pulled low, but his eyes met hers this time. "I'm thinking about law school," he said. She smiled. "You should." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you write me a letter?" Maya paused, then nodded. "I'd be honored." And for the first time in a long while, she felt something solid beneath her feet. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't peace. It was purpose. She'd spent years fighting within a system that expected her to be grateful for its scraps. She'd handed it proof, blood, data, and still it asked her to speak softly, to wait, to smile. She wouldn't do that anymore, because the truth didn't need permission. It needed a witness, and Maya Owens had never been afraid to see clearly. They say justice is blind, but maybe that was never the goal. Maybe justice was always meant to be seen, by those bold enough to name what others only whisper, by those willing to speak when the silence feels safest, and by those like Maya Owens, who didn't come to save the system, but to hold a mirror to its face. Her name eventually faded from the headlines. The city moved on, as cities do. New cases took over the news cycle. A different tragedy, a different hashtag. But for the people who watched her stand up in court, unflinching, and say, this was wrong, she didn't fade. Because something in them shifted. They began to ask better questions about why some kids are seen as threats before they're even heard, about why accountability feels like rebellion, about what it costs a black woman to speak out in a system that only tolerates her when she's silent. Maya never called herself a hero. Heroes get statues. She didn't want one. She wanted a seat at the table where laws were made, where stories were shaped, where silence used to win. And when that seat wasn't offered, she carved her own. Years later, long after the courthouse lights dimmed and the Keller case became a footnote in textbooks, one of Maya's students stood in front of a lecture hall, trembling but steady, preparing to argue their first mock trial. Before speaking, they looked down at the note Maya had written on their first essay. It read, "Don't just learn the law, watch how it's used, and then choose what kind of voice you'll be." That student would go on to defend children who looked like Jamal, would go on to fight for policies Maya once bled to expose, would carry her fire without needing her name. And that quietly, undeniably was victory. Because when a racist cop killed a black teen, the system expected grief, silence, acceptance. It expected the world to forget. But the black prosecutor refused to let it slide. And because of her, we remember, Maya Owens didn't walk away with applause. There were no medals, no parades, no grateful handshakes from the powers that be. Just quiet. The kind that comes when a storm passes but leaves the landscape forever changed. She lost some things: friends, favors, the easy comfort of belonging. But what she kept was integrity. What she held on to was Jamal's name, and the promise that someone, somewhere, would remember it not as a headline, but as a turning point. Because the real story isn't just that a racist cop pulled the trigger. The real story is that someone stood up after, someone with everything to lose, someone who saw a child where the world saw a threat. And when the courtroom doors finally closed, when the cameras stopped rolling, when the city slipped back into its routines, truth remained. Justice isn't what happens in a verdict. It's what lives in the people brave enough to ask why. Maya Owens never set out to be a symbol. She set out to tell the truth and to hold the silence accountable. So if you remember nothing else, remember this: the system will always try to bury stories like Jamal's. But as long as there's one voice left willing to say, "This was wrong," the story's not over. And Maya Owens, she was that voice. And because of her, we still hear Jamal's name.